A man doesn't treat a woman as an option by accident. He does so when she unconsciously teaches him that her presence requires no effort. To pause with this, not to judge, not to criticize, but to see clearly. In a relationship, romantic or otherwise, what we accept becomes the curriculum we teach, and what we model becomes the truth others believe about how they may treat us. Men, like all human beings, respond to resonance. If your energy says, "I will wait until you choose me," you've already positioned yourself as a passenger in your own emotional journey. But if your energy says, "I am already chosen," from within, you become unmistakably different, not louder, not colder, but clearer. And in clarity, men transform. Let us begin. There is an ancient principle often echoed in both Eastern wisdom and modern neuroscience. Energy introduces you before you speak. It is not your appearance, not your status, not even your charm that tells others how to treat you. It is your inner frequency. This energy, though invisible, is unmistakable. It is the quiet signal of self-regard that speaks directly to the subconscious of those around you. Especially in romantic dynamics, this silent transmission determines whether a woman is seen as the one or merely an option. When a woman carries herself with internal alignment, a man senses something distinct. He cannot always articulate it, but he feels it. Her boundaries are not rigid. They are simply clear. Her presence is not loud, but it is undeniably rooted. She does not need to chase, to convince, or to prove. She is already whole, and this wholeness radiates as a kind of personal gravity. Just as planets orbit a sun due to its mass, people gravitate toward those who have come home to themselves. To understand this deeper, consider how the nervous system functions. Humans are biologically wired to scan for safety, for resonance, and for congruence. The brain has specialized neurons, mirror neurons, that subconsciously mimic and reflect the emotions and energies of others. When a woman enters a space deeply connected to herself, the people around her, especially men, register this calm coherence. It lowers their defenses, heightens their attention, and commands respect without needing to demand it. One might imagine this as the difference between someone offering you a warm cup of tea in silence versus someone pleading with you to drink it while explaining how good it tastes. The first is received. The second feels overwhelming, even suspicious. This is how energy operates. If a woman walks into a relationship trying to prove her worth, her actions, no matter how well-intentioned, signal lack. She becomes an option because her energy says she is waiting for validation. But when a woman knows her worth, when she has sat in her solitude and emerged with clarity, her energy shifts. She no longer tries to convince anyone of her value. And paradoxically, this makes her profoundly magnetic. It's not manipulation, it's authenticity. She becomes the calm center in a chaotic world, the still pond in which a man sees his truest reflection. There's a story of an older woman who spent years feeling overlooked by the man she loved. She would make herself available at all hours, overextend to please, and suppress her discomfort to maintain peace. Over time, she began to feel invisible, not because she lacked anything, but because her energy, without her realizing it, communicated. "I'll stay even if you don't choose me." When she finally chose herself, not with anger, but with calm certainty, something changed. She stopped reaching out first. She no longer said yes when she meant no. She began walking daily, reading again, reconnecting with her breath. She didn't leave him, she simply returned to herself. Within weeks, he noticed, he leaned in, he began asking about her thoughts, her day, her emotions. She hadn't changed her appearance. She hadn't issued ultimatums. But her energy had recalibrated, and his nervous system picked up on it. He no longer saw her as someone waiting to be chosen. He saw her as someone who already belonged to herself. and this made her irreplaceable. This principle also explains why some women experience repeated patterns of being treated as a temporary interest rather than a lasting partner. It is not a flaw. It is often a reflection of their own unconscious narrative. If a woman believes she must earn love, she will attract those who make her prove herself. If she believes that her presence is a gift, her relationships will mirror that belief. Now, from the perspective of brain chemistry, we know that emotional states influence hormonal responses. Confidence, for instance, lowers cortisol and increases serotonin. A woman who feels good in her own skin projects a kind of emotional immunity. Men are drawn to this not because of ego, but because the male nervous system interprets such confidence as emotional safety. In a world full of unpredictable emotional storms, grounded women feel like shelter. This is not about dominance. It's about resonance. The way she breathes, the way she speaks, the way she holds eye contact. It all stems from her internal atmosphere. If her thoughts are filled with scarcity and self-doubt, it will show. If her thoughts are filled with self-respect and presence, that too will show. Energy cannot be faked, but it can be cultivated. It begins in stillness, in solitude, in choosing not to chase connection, but to anchor within. And as this energy stabilizes, something remarkable happens. The people who once kept her on standby begin to respond differently. Not because they changed, but because the field around her did. This brings us to a subtle but profound truth. The moment you stop needing to be someone's priority is often the moment you become one. A man knows when a woman is centered. He may not understand it logically, but he feels it emotionally. He feels it in how she doesn't flinch at silence, in how she doesn't overcompensate for his lack of effort, in how she doesn't sacrifice her joy to accommodate his uncertainty. And this steadiness, this inner anchoring, is what tells him she is not like the rest. There's an ancient Taoist idea that says, the wise woman does not pursue, yet nothing escapes her. This is not passivity. It is a reminder that true power is not in striving. It is in alignment. It is the internal decision to radiate rather than chase, to embody rather than explain. And here is where we move naturally into presence, because it is through presence, not performance, that emotional bonds are truly formed. The modern world teaches women that they must perform to be chosen, look a certain way, say the right words, meet every need. But real connection does not arise from performance. It arises from presence. And presence, by its very nature, cannot be forced. Imagine two women in a room. One is vibrant, engaged, but trying a bit too hard, laughing a bit too loudly, making herself agreeable, anticipating what others want to hear. The other woman says little. She's not disengaged, just present. She listens fully. Her responses are thoughtful. She is calm. She is not seeking approval, and yet people drift toward her. Why? Because in her presence, others feel safe to be themselves. This is the essence of emotional availability. It is not about how much you say or do. It is about how deeply you inhabit your own body, your own spirit. When a woman is fully present, she does not need to ask a man to show up. He simply wants to. Presence is what transforms attraction into connection. Performance creates attention, but presence creates trust. And men, especially those who are emotionally intelligent, are searching not for perfection, but for resonance. A woman who is truly present signals that she is emotionally available, not reactive, not manipulative, but open. She listens, she responds, but she does not lose herself in the process. This emotional steadiness tells a man, here is someone with whom I can build something real. Psychologists have long studied the concept of attunement, the ability to be present with another's emotions without losing one's own center. This skill, often seen in secure parents, is the foundation of healthy adult relationships. When a woman attunes to herself first, she becomes naturally attuned to others. And this emotional depth is what distinguishes the one from the option. A woman who is attuned doesn't react impulsively. She notices her emotions without letting them dictate her behavior. When a man pulls away, she doesn't panic. She reflects. She breathes. She chooses her response. This conscious presence is rare and profoundly attractive. It tells a man, "You are welcome, but I do not lose myself for your presence. I invite you, but I do not abandon me." There's a story of a woman who had been dating someone for several months. He was inconsistent, warm one week, distant the next. Rather than confront him in anger or plead for clarity, she made a different choice. She paused. She reflected on how she felt during the highs and lows. Then she wrote him a message, not out of frustration, but from grounded awareness. She thanked him for their time, shared how she felt, and said she would no longer invest in a connection that felt uncertain. She did not ask for anything. She simply stated her truth and stepped back. Weeks later, he returned, not with apologies, but with clarity. Her emotional availability had revealed his own emotional immaturity. Her presence, steady and calm, made him realize what he had taken for granted. And while they did not reunite, something deeper occurred. She chose herself, and in doing so, made space for someone truly ready to choose her. This is not about controlling how others behave. It is about controlling how you show up. When you are present, when your energy reflects your worth, you no longer wait to be chosen. You become the mirror in which others see their potential. And in that mirror, some will rise, while others will fade. But the most important transformation is not theirs. It is yours. Because when you embody presence, when your energy reflects inner peace, you stop being available for relationships that drain you. You no longer fear being alone because your solitude is rich. And from that richness, true partnership can emerge. What makes a woman the one is not what she does for a man. It is what she evokes in him. Her energy, her presence, her self-regard, they invite him to meet her there. And if he cannot, she does not lower herself. She blesses him from afar and continues walking her path, because she knows the one who is meant for her will not hesitate to meet her in her fullness. In every human interaction, the mind is constantly filtering, evaluating, and categorizing. This is especially true in romantic dynamics, where a man often does not operate solely from his conscious mind, but from a deep-rooted internal compass shaped by biology, past experience, and emotional memory. Whether he is aware of it or not, he is always asking one question when he interacts with a woman: how do I feel in her presence? This question, though silent, determines everything. It determines whether he leans in or pulls away, whether he engages or evades, whether he opens his heart or retreats behind silence. And the answer does not come from analysis. It comes from emotional impact. Every woman leaves an emotional fingerprint. Some leave a trail of temporary excitement, fleeting, pleasurable, but shallow. Others imprint something deeper, an energy that lingers, that challenges, that awakens. These are not measured by how much time she spends with him, how much she gives, or how much she accommodates. Rather, it is the contrast she introduces into his life that defines her. Contrast does not mean conflict. It means she brings clarity. In her presence, he feels something shift. There's an old saying, you recognize the light only after you've sat in darkness. This principle is at the heart of contrast. A woman who is deeply rooted in herself, who moves with grace but carries standards like a spine of steel, creates a different atmosphere around her. She doesn't tolerate inconsistency. She doesn't chase explanations. Her energy says, this is what I offer. This is what I allow. The rest is not welcome here. And suddenly, a man is faced with something unfamiliar, Clarity. Most people, including men, are used to blurred lines. They are used to relationships that float between interest and convenience, between attraction and avoidance. But when a woman stands clearly in what she will and will not accept, it jolts the mind awake. It interrupts the familiar patterns. She becomes the interruption to his confusion, the calm boundary to his chaos. A man who is still unsure of himself may flinch at this. He may retreat, feeling the discomfort of being asked, without words, to show up more fully. But a man who is ready, or even close to being ready, will feel pulled toward her, not because she pleases him, but because she challenges him to become more. And that's what contrast does. It doesn't entertain, it elevates. Consider this: a woman who is always available, always agreeable, and always adapting slowly fades into the background of a man's mind, not because she lacks beauty or kindness, but because she does not introduce contrast. Her presence, though lovely, blends into the sea of familiarity. But the woman who pauses before answering, who takes space when needed, who does not fear disappointing someone by honoring her truth, that woman becomes unforgettable. Not for her effort, but for her energy. One young man shared a story of a woman he dated briefly. She was kind, attentive, and eager to build something serious, but she adjusted to everything: his schedule, his moods, even his silence. And though he appreciated her, he never felt fully awake in her presence. Until one evening, she asked him gently, "What are you looking for in this connection?" He hesitated. He wasn't sure. She smiled, not with resentment, but with clarity, and said, "When you are, let me know. Until then, I choose peace." She left with grace, not anger, and her absence echoed louder than her presence ever did. Months later, he still thought of her, not because of what she gave, but because of what she didn't allow. Her refusal to delude herself, to wait in uncertainty, became the contrast that changed him. She became the reference point against which he measured every interaction after. This is the unseen power of contrast. It draws no attention to itself. It doesn't argue, explain, or justify. It simply stands still, unshaken. And this stillness becomes the mirror in which a man sees himself more clearly. But clarity is only half the equation. The other half is the mirror itself. The truth that a man's behavior toward a woman often reflects her relationship with herself. The outer world mirrors the inner state. A man's reaction, his respect or lack of it, his presence or absence, these are not always a reflection of his character alone. Often, they reflect what a woman unconsciously allows, permits, or repeats. This is not blame, it is awareness. If a woman constantly overextends in relationships, often giving more than she receives, it becomes a pattern that men intuitively recognize. They begin to test, not out of malice, but out of subconscious curiosity. Will she still stay if I give less? Will she still smile if I show up late? Will she still answer if I disappear for days? These questions are rarely spoken, but they are asked nonetheless. And each time the answer is yes, each time the woman bends to accommodate a lack of clarity, she teaches him a dangerous lesson, that her presence is unconditional, even in the face of inconsistency. But when a woman is connected to her own internal compass, the mirror changes. She no longer seeks approval through sacrifice. She no longer entertains partial effort. She does not need to punish or scold. Her silence becomes her decision. Her absence becomes her boundary. There is a quiet wisdom in understanding that men do not always change because we explain things better. They change when they are ready, because we embody something different. One woman shared a powerful example. After years of being in relationships where she felt like a convenience, she decided to stop participating in her own disrespect. She began to meditate daily, to journal, to practice saying no without explanation. She didn't change her job, her friends, or her style. She changed her energy. And suddenly, the men who once lingered without commitment disappeared. New men appeared, those who asked meaningful questions, who respected her time, who listened more than they spoke. Not because the world changed, but because she did. The mind often resists this truth. It wants to believe the power lies outside, in convincing others, in waiting for them to see our value. But real transformation begins within. When a woman sees herself clearly, the world has no choice but to follow. From a psychological standpoint, this mirrors the principle of self-fulfilling prophecy. Our beliefs shape our behaviors, and our behaviors invite certain responses. If a woman believes she is not enough, she may overgive. Her overgiving invites people to take. The taking reinforces her belief of inadequacy. It becomes a cycle until it is interrupted. The interruption does not come from confrontation. It comes from stillness, from choosing to no longer participate in a dynamic that does not reflect her worth. And this choice is felt. A man knows when a woman has made peace with solitude. He knows when she is no longer holding space for his uncertainty. Not because she announces it, but because her energy no longer waits. This is the mirror, and it is not cruel, it is clear. Men rise to meet the standard that a woman sets within herself, or they leave. Either way, the truth becomes visible, and in that truth, there is freedom. It is easy to fall into the habit of waiting for someone to change, to choose, to commit. But waiting is not stillness. Stillness is active. It is the conscious choice to remain grounded, to listen inward, and to act from a place of self-respect. One woman who had spent years in a relationship without clarity decided to stop asking for it, not out of resentment, but out of recognition. She realized she had become the caretaker of the connection, keeping it alive through her effort alone. And in that moment, she put down the weight. She stopped calling. She stopped reaching out. She did not leave with a scene. She simply returned to herself. And in that space, she rediscovered parts of herself that had gone quiet. Her laugh returned. Her sleep deepened. Her creativity bloomed. And then, slowly, he noticed. He reached out. He asked to meet. He brought clarity. Not because she demanded it, but because her absence revealed what her presence had once concealed, his own indifference. When a woman becomes the mirror, she offers a man a chance. Not a guarantee, but a chance to step into something higher. And whether he does or doesn't is not her concern. Her task is only to reflect, not to fix. The journey of a woman who transitions from being an option to being the one is not marked by external changes. It is marked by an internal return. A return to integrity, a return to intuition, a return to truth. And truth, once inhabited, no longer tolerates distortion. This is how a woman shifts from being categorized to being chosen. Not because she tries harder, but because she becomes rarer. Rarity is not about being unavailable. It's about being unavailable for anything that costs your peace. And in that stillness, something begins to happen. Men either rise to meet you, or they vanish, not as a punishment, but as a reflection. The woman who lives in emotional clarity becomes a teacher, without saying a word. And in her presence, the truth of others is revealed. Some will shrink, some will step up, all will be seen. In a world that glorifies urgency and constant motion, stillness has become a forgotten art. But in the landscape of relationships, stillness is not a void. It is a signal. It communicates certainty, peace, and self-trust without the use of words. When a woman can be still in her energy, she is no longer emotionally volatile. She is no longer reacting to every shift in a man's behavior or trying to force intimacy where it hasn't taken root. Instead, she becomes a calm presence that draws in depth and clarity. Her stillness becomes a magnet, not to manipulate, but to attract what is aligned with her. Stillness is not passivity. It is refined presence. It is not about doing nothing, but about doing nothing from a place of lack. A woman who sits in stillness is not waiting, she is observing. She is not chasing clarity from others, she is building it within herself. And it is this stillness, not performance or persuasion, that invites a man to step into his own truth. From a psychological perspective, stillness demonstrates emotional regulation. It shows that a woman has developed the capacity to feel deeply without losing control. She can be disappointed and still respectful. She can be uncertain and still composed. This level of self-mastery does not go unnoticed. The male nervous system, which is wired to scan for safety and stability in partnership, feels this emotional discipline as both grounding and compelling. When a woman is overly reactive, it may be because she is trying to secure love. But love cannot be secured through reactivity. Love that is pressured becomes performance. Real love, the kind that grows and stays, requires room to breathe. And stillness offers that room. It allows space for truth to surface, for misalignment to become visible, for the right connection to recognize itself. A woman shared a story once. She had been dating a man who was inconsistent, calling passionately one week, disappearing the next. Every time he drifted away, she would text, call, question. Her emotions would spiral, and she would try harder to win back his attention. But after months of emotional exhaustion, she made a new choice. The next time he pulled away, she didn't chase. She didn't protest. She breathed. She journaled. She went to the park, sat under the sun, and watched the sky change colors. She let the discomfort rise and fall like a wave. And when he returned, days later, with his usual vague apologies, she simply said, "I need consistency, not confusion." Her voice was soft, her energy was calm, and she didn't wait for his response. She returned to her life. That moment became a turning point, not because he suddenly changed, but because she did. She learned that her stillness had more power than all her emotional effort, that it was not her intensity that made her valuable, but her peace, and that peace cannot be shared until it is protected. Stillness gives space for the masculine to feel his own presence. When a woman is constantly filling the silence, reaching out, or trying to hold the relationship together, she is doing the emotional labor that he must learn to carry himself. But when she steps back, not out of punishment, but out of trust in her own worth, she creates a vacuum that invites clarity. If he is ready, he will fill it with presence. If he is not, he will retreat further. But either way, the truth reveals itself. Stillness, in its highest form, is an act of faith. Faith in one's own value. Faith in what is meant to unfold. Faith that love does not require force, but readiness. This is where we begin to see the interplay between stillness and standards. The standard is not what you say. It is what your stillness enforces. A woman who needs to explain her boundaries repeatedly has not yet embodied them. But the woman who can calmly step back when a standard is violated speaks louder than any words. This is not coldness. It is warmth with direction, compassion with clarity, love that knows its worth. Men are often not pushed into change. They are invited, and that invitation is clearest when a woman no longer allows herself to be swayed by inconsistency, when she no longer fills in the gaps of his absence with her effort, when she sits in her own peace long enough for the noise to clear. From a neurological standpoint, this kind of emotional calm activates what psychologists call co-regulation. It allows the other person to settle into their own nervous system. But when a woman is in emotional overdrive, always fixing, guiding, or compensating, there is no room for the other to grow. Stillness makes space for evolution, not because it demands it, but because it refuses to interrupt it. And in this space, the highest standard is set, not by control, but by presence. A man who steps into that space will either rise to meet it or step out of the frame altogether. Either outcome is a gift, because both protect the sacred energy of a woman who refuses to be defined by someone else's confusion. Now consider how this stillness contrasts with the invisible test that so many women fail without realizing. The test is not spoken, it is not planned, but it is deeply embedded in human behavior. Every man, at some point, consciously or not, tests the boundaries of the woman he is with. This is not always malicious. Often, it is unconscious. He is observing what the energy allows, what the silence tolerates, what the woman will justify or explain away. And here lies the most dangerous mistake, mistaking love for leniency. When a woman excuses disrespect, overlooks broken promises, or remains emotionally available after being treated as a backup plan, she is teaching him how to treat her. Not through words, but through repetition. Every time she says, "It's okay," when it's not, she lowers the standard. Every time she responds quickly to a man who disappeared for days, she tells him, "You don't have to be consistent. I'll still be here." Every time she forgives without accountability, she reinforces the belief that her heart can be mishandled without consequence. This is not kindness. This is self-abandonment. Men are intuitive in this regard. They know when they can get away with doing less. They know when a woman will stay no matter how unclear, how inconsistent, or how inattentive they are. And unless a man is deeply evolved, he will take that allowance as permission, not because he lacks conscience, but because humans repeat what works. This is the invisible test, and it begins subtly. He texts less. He replies slower. He avoids meaningful conversations. He starts showing up late, canceling plans, or prioritizing other things. He notices your reaction. Do you address it directly? Do you change your behavior in response? Or do you pretend not to notice? Your response writes the rule book. And once that rule is written, it's difficult to rewrite. A woman once shared a painful but powerful story. She was deeply in love with a man who had charm, ambition, and attention from many others. In the beginning, he was attentive, generous, and emotionally present. But as the months passed, he began to test the waters. He started making subtle jokes at her expense. He would ignore her calls for hours. He'd flirt openly with others and laugh when she brought it up. Each time, she forgave him quickly, afraid that drawing a line would push him away. But each act of leniency became a silent contract. I will stay, even if it hurts. Eventually, he stopped pretending. He was careless with her feelings, unbothered by her tears. He knew she wouldn't leave, and that knowledge made him lazy. She stayed until her spirit began to shrink, until she could no longer recognize the vibrant woman she had once been. And when she finally walked away, not with anger, but with sorrow, he begged her to stay. But by then, something sacred had already been eroded, her belief in her own standard. This story is not unique. It plays out in countless relationships. The form may change, but the pattern remains. And the pattern is this: when you allow yourself to be treated as optional, you become so. But here is the deeper truth. The test is not about the man. It is about the woman's awareness. She is being invited again and again to choose herself, to choose peace over potential, to choose clarity over confusion, to choose dignity over desire. The more she chooses herself, the fewer tests she faces, because her energy no longer matches those who would question her value. This is where the highest level of relational self-mastery emerges. When a woman no longer waits for someone to treat her better, she treats herself well enough that anything less becomes energetically incompatible. And so the lesson becomes embodied, not through fear, not through bitterness, but through wisdom. Stillness becomes her compass, standards become her protection, and her presence once diluted by effort, becomes a force that cannot be ignored. Men sense this. They may not have words for it, but they feel it in their bones. Some will rise to meet her in that space, others will retreat. But either way, the path becomes clear. And in clarity, there is peace. When a man truly sees a woman as the one rather than just option, his energy changes. Not because he's trying to impress her, but because something deeper within him awakens. He no longer operates from a place of convenience or ego, but from a space of presence, honor, and intentionality. She becomes a mirror that reflects back to him the man he is capable of becoming. His actions begin to align with integrity. His words carry weight, and his emotional availability is no longer an afterthought. It becomes his commitment. This shift is not rooted in fantasy or external appearances. It's born out of energetic alignment. Because in relationships, people don't just respond to what we say, they respond to what we embody. And when a woman stands firmly in her self-worth, a man who is aligned with truth cannot help but meet her there or walk away. There is no in between. Love, when it is mature and conscious, no longer plays games. It becomes a path of transformation, one that requires both people to step beyond patterns of insecurity and performance and into presence, patience, and true emotional discipline, the kind of love that sees clearly, the kind that builds slowly, the kind that stays because it has roots, not wings meant only for momentary flight. If you have ever been made to feel like a placeholder in someone's life, understand that this was not a reflection of your value, but of their readiness. Someone else's inability to recognize your worth is not your cue to prove yourself. It is your sign to pause, to reclaim, and to rise. The clarity you seek in love will never come from overthinking or overgiving. It will come when you choose stillness over chasing, peace over proving, and alignment over attachment. Then, and only then, will you naturally attract the kind of relationship that is not afraid to commit, not confused about your presence, and not casual about your heart. In this life, we are all learning how to love better. But the first and most vital lesson is this: you are never just an option. You were never meant to be chosen halfway. You are not waiting to be seen. You are the vision itself. The man who is ready will not need convincing. He will already know.